Tom Brevoort. Where is Synch? Where is Everett Thomas? I'm looking for this guy. Here he is. This is what he looks like. He was featured heavily in the X-Men prior when Jerry Duggan was the one who was writing and that Jordan D. White bum was doing the editing. Now he's gone and there's a new regime, but that does not mean there needs to be an absence of this character. When a character like him gets 3 straight years of focus, maybe not heavily focused, but at least he was in the prime X-Men comic book, you would think if representation is so important to someone like you, then you would build on that as opposed to what you're doing now. You were just ignoring him. I haven't seen him. There's so many titles that are coming out. He's not being used in any of them. He's just being ignored. Where is Synch? This is supposed to be a character who... let's get more on the company, not the character. You guys say you're about representation. You complained about this. Remember that quote? I remember that quote. Here it is on your Substack, and I'll read the quote right before. I have some specific thoughts, but there's plenty of room for the characters I and my crew are reaching out towards to reboot them and put their own spin on things. And just because there are some particular types of characters that I see a deficit of in the X line, I wish there were more viable black male characters, for example, that doesn't mean that those deficits are going to be immediately addressed. That's because the guy asking the question, and salute to him for at least doing this, he was asking about representation, clicking boxes and all that stuff. So he is saying right here in these parentheses that, I wish that there were more viable black male characters, for example. My man, you're in charge of controlling this issue and you're prolonging this issue. There's already a character in Everett who for 3 years, forget that you hate the other editor. Forget that. For 3 years, you had a male character, not on X Factor, Excalibur, it was in the X-Men. It was in the Prime. Every election, he was not up for losing. It was Synch. You had that. You recognize there's a problem, yet you're not using Synch. How does that make sense to anybody? He's missing. He's gone. But don't worry. Don't worry, guys. There's going to be a black character. I don't like the male-female stuff. There's going to be a black character here on the X-Men. And here it is on Jed McKay's team we saw. It's going to be Oyo. What was her name? I forget her name. Okay, her name is Oya, and she's going by the name Temper. She can do heat, and she can do cool. That's the thing that she's got that makes her special. Except there's already someone of her exact demographic who exists. So you're telling me you chose secondary Storm to be put into the primary X-Men team, and you think like that's representation? Fam, that's attendance. Let me explain to you. Why do you think any guy who's reading these comics, customers, or any fan or potential fan, is gonna care that Oya Temper is on this team when we just saw what you did with the last one? We just saw you go a 3-year run, you the company that you've inherited, and ignore that character. Especially when the character is a secondary version of Storm. Especially when this character never sold. Let's take a character like Cyclops who's standing right there on the team. You know why we know this character is worth getting invested in? Because we've seen 50 years of this character always being important, always being used. Beast. We've seen this character always, if not in the top. He's always in the top 10, these guys. Storm is always in the top 10, no matter what storyline or overarching X-Men issue that the mutants are facing. These are always constants. The same way we know that, the character you selected, Temper, Oya, we have, since she's been created, over 10 years of a pattern that we've accepted, that we've observed, and we have collected as data to know that she is a bum. This is a character who debuted and she was featured on Generation Hope. She was on Hope's comic book title. Now, was that comic book canceled? Kinda. It went over to 17. It stopped for Avengers vs. X-Men, and then they didn't restart again with more of her. Oya wasn't even the main character of that team. If anyone was going to get anything out of it, it would have been Hope. For example, can you even remember the other members of the team? Because there was another one who could fly who was supposed to be Angel. There was another one who could be like the Beast of that version. There's all these characters who were kind of forgettable. But, issue 17, that's something. No, it's not. There was 2 other ongoing comic book series that did worse than this comic. It was Dakin and Where's He Been? How frequently has Dakin been showing up? And when he does show up, where's he been? The other comic was Ghost Rider, which was on its cancellation issue. I remember this because I just looked it up right before I started. Shout out Comicron. When you think about Oya and the potential that she has and the ceiling that she has, the comparison that she has in Storm, what are you doing? You had Synch on a on a platter at least being used. You could have took more credit. You could have took Synch stories to the next level, and you're saying, nah, we're gonna cut that out and we're gonna do something else. Don't worry, guys, you'll get your representation. There's a difference between representation and attendance. The symbols of representation, or the tokens, the people that you use, the characters that you will utilize. So the token, not represent. What's the word I'm looking for? I'll say the pieces or the representatives of representation that you select gotta be the right ones. It's gotta be someone that, and you gotta get behind them, and you gotta stay behind them. You gotta, like, Oya's not the one. Now, could she be the one? Like I told you, she's got the secondary storm factor, but could she be the one? Sure, she could be. But what are the chances that the next editor who comes in after you is going to just drop the ball and not want to continue same way you're doing with Synch? That's why I'm so sure that you should be using Synch. I'm so strongly advocating that you continue to use Synch. It's only going to be a couple, maybe 3-4 comics that have already been written that you guys already kind of have cemented. All right, but can we at least in the next arc or the next year of your X-Men, can we include Synch into a team? You can kill Oya. We don't need her. There's levels of characters. There's characters who have been treated much more importantly, like Bishop. Freaking even Tempo gets better treatment than Synch. At least she's older and she has a longer familiarity with a fan base. You can use so many other characters like Monet. But you chose to use Oya. Oh yeah. Where's Synch, man? I'm not asking for a Synch solo series. I'm asking for Synch to be used in the Uncanny X-Men or the X-Men comic book, your two main comic books. I did say that. I don't believe the hype in Exceptional X-Men. The glaring truths of the matter is you don't understand what you're doing when it comes to the topic of representation, Tom. You don't. I'm going to tag you on Twitter. I hope you listen to this. I disagree with what you did. I agree with what you said. There's not enough black male viable characters. Sure, there's not, because we know who the main X-Men are. None of them, outside of the top 10, maybe we can start talking about Bishop. Gentle? Nah, like Bishop. Manifold, he's pretty... Why not Manifold over Oya? But anyways, I understand your point. I agree with your point. You were doing nothing to solve it. You're doing nothing at all. You recognize the problem. You recognize the underrepresented group. Okay, cool. I don't care about male, female. You could use females too. But I want the black representation. I want people with melanin in their skin being used and being used often and being used and being written by top creators. That's kind of what I'm advocating here for. Maroa Iodeli is going to be writing the Storms comic book series. And I look at you, and I don't care how good you think Maroa Iodeli is. I'm looking at how small that name is. I'm looking at how small that page rate is. And I'm thinking about how you are not doing what's best for Storm by putting a top tier creator. Unless I'm wrong. Unless Maroa Iodeli's next comic book is going to be not I Am Iron Man, but Iron Man. Unless Maroa Iodeli's next story is going to be, you guys have him that highly that he'll be the new Avengers writer. Until that day happens, I'm wrong. I'm proven to be correct. You chose a nobody or a small name to be writing the Storm comic book series. I'm looking at you talk representation, but not hold it down for representation. Tom Brevoort. Synch still has a fan base that's been growing from years ago, but specifically the last 3 years of him being on the main X-Men team for 30 comics, on the cover of some of those comics. Use Synch. Too often do resources go to characters like Synch and are spent for nothing. What's the point of all that screen time he got, page time he got, if it's not going to be capitalized on when the next guy comes over and says no more Synch? That is so stupid. Whatever beef you have with Jordan, or however you want to stick it to him, whatever beef you have with Jordan, put representation at the forefront and just think about how you want to be known for what you did with Synch, with how much better representation is on the X-Men line. Of all the candidates, write a list. You'll start with Aurora Monroe. The second name on there, if it's not Synch, maybe it's Bishop. I don't know how you think. Everyone's going to vary. But Synch is up there and Oya's down here. You're wasting resources by featuring Oya, who is a perennial bum, who we all accept to be a bum, who you're going to have to take a long time to wash off that stigma. And then as soon as you're done, who's to say that the next writer is going to take Oya seriously when they say they already have a Storm? It is a waste of resources from you by you. I hope Oya dies on issue number 3. I'll give her 3 issues. Let's make us have some sympathy, make us think that she's going to survive, and there she goes. Temper? I take Tempo over Temper. And And I'll take Synch over anybody. Anybody but Storm. Last thing for everybody yelling at their screens. This is unconfirmed, the Krakoan masked character in NYX. But if it is him, I stand by. This is not a main X-Men title. This will be cancelled. Let's get him on the X-Men or the Uncanny X-Men.